Okay, part 6. Picking up where I left off yesterday. Objection 2. What was objection 1? Objection 1, the optimally adjusted person and the successful client are said to be impulse-ridden and dangerous. Okay, so objection 2. Objection 2. The Rogerian optimal person and successful client seem to use no cognitive constructs, no intellectually refined differentiations. They only feel. They are pure emotion. A concept or intellectual abstraction is a differentiation of experiencing. A concept or intellectual abstraction is a differentiation of experiencing. Elsewhere, I have tried to formulate this characteristic of concepts in philosophic terms. What does that mean? A concept is a differentiation of experiencing. I don't know what he means by this exactly. Does that mean it's like that it's different from experiencing, or that it's part of experiencing and you're like looking closer at experiencing and you're seeing that actually there's all this nuance there and you've been able to then differentiate that part of experiencing is concept and intellectual abstraction. I don't know if he means either of those, but those are the two things that come up. For example, before speaking, we do not usually think all the words or concepts which we are about to say. What we mean exists in us as a subjective feeling. When we speak, we refer directly to this feeling and the proper concepts or words come to us. If the words or concepts that come are not the right ones, we say, "Now let's see. What did I mean?" Again, referring directly to our subjectively felt sense of what we meant. He likes to talk about this a lot, about the things that we say are not pre-formulated before we speak. And I agree with him, and the more I've explored improv, the more I've gotten comfortable speaking off the cuff, the less in my head I've become over the years. You know, I experience it all the time in making these videos that I don't really know what I'm going to say until I begin. Or I don't know what I'm going to say moment by moment until I begin saying something. But I do know that in the past, I was not this way, and I very much was inclined to try to figure out everything that I wanted to say before speaking. You know, this is like, I know that I've heard this said about Obama, for example, that he was extremely good at this, or this was a way that people described his way of speaking, was that he took his time and he thought through what he wanted to say before responding to people. Everything, and I don't mean this in a bad way necessarily, but everything he said came through as, I suppose, very calculated, or like highly articulate. So if you are like I was, and still am at times, more disposed to try to think through what you want to say before you open your mouth, I can see how this might not register as a reality to you or to a person. It's similar to in his paper on improvisation provides. He talks about how we only can arrive at structure through a process of improvisation. Improvisation precedes structure. It provides structure because that's how we get to it. But again, as I used to be when writing, for example, if you try to only write perfectly formulated sentences, right? If you won't allow yourself to improvise onto the page, if you won't allow yourself to say something that might not be exactly right, and if you're also not super attentive to your mental process, like if you're not really paying attention to that, then you probably won't, again, register that there is that space between not knowing and knowing, where you're kind of just making shit up and it's not perfect and it's improvised and it's only really a feeling. I'm going off of this thing right here. What we mean exists in us as a subjective feeling, right? It doesn't exist first and foremost already there as words. But yeah, I can absolutely see why lots of people wouldn't register this, wouldn't agree with this. And there are plenty of people who I talk to and hear speak on a day-to-day basis who, in a way, this almost doesn't seem true for, because they never seem to be inarticulate. They never seem to have to stop and think and fumble for their words. It always seems to be already fully worked out, like they've said it a million times. And I wonder about those people, what's going on in their mind, that they're able to speak that way. I don't know. But anyway, this definitely is true for me, right? I have a feeling of what I want to say. I try to say it, and if it doesn't feel right, if I say it and it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't, I forget the name of the 6 steps in focusing, but if you don't like try to match it against your feeling, or if you do try to match it against your feeling and it doesn't match, then you're like, okay, that didn't really express excuse me, that didn't really express what I was trying to say, so how can I say this again, right? That's the whole point of focusing, is to go through that process over and over again. If the words or concepts that come are not the right ones, we say, now let's see, what did I mean? Again, referring directly to our subjectively felt sense of what we mean. This observation can be formulated by the following assertion. Intellectual meanings are experienced as aspects of a subjectively felt referent. If we refer to this referent, we can differentiate and conceptualize meanings. Thus, intellectual meanings are in their very nature aspects of subjective feelings. Any moment's subjective feeling implicitly contains many possible meanings which could be differentiated and symbolized. Okay, so that lends itself to what I was wondering about in this sentence, about it being a differentiation of experience, right? So it's like a zooming in and noticing a finer detail of experiencing. Not that it's a wholly separate thing, but that it's a component of, right, aspect of the felt sense. Intellectual meanings are experienced as aspects of a felt sense. Right, and that's what you do in focusing, as I talked about last time. Focusing is symbolizing raw experience. So if you are attending to a felt sense, which starts as raw experience, which starts implicit, which starts without any way to articulate it, and then you begin through various attempts to symbolize it and find handles for it and find the structure and give it a word, it becomes or can become a concept. And so in that felt sense is implicit this concept. The intellectual meaning is implicit in the felt sense. Any moment's subjective feeling implicitly contains many possible meanings, which could be differentiated and symbolized. Everything we learn, think, or read enriches the implicit meanings contained in our subjective felt referent. For example, after reading a theoretical paper, my feeling about it will implicitly contain many intellectual perceptions and meanings which I have because I have spent years of reading and thinking. When I write a commentary on the paper, I symbolize explicitly the meanings which were implicit in my feelings after I read the paper. I like that about writing, that in writing we symbolize, since that is so thoroughly what it is, right? To write is to symbolize our feelings with letters and with words and with sentences. Yeah. So in writing about a thing, I mean, that's an awesome way to think about writing in general, right? No matter what you're writing about. To write about your response to something, your full response, your feelings and your thoughts about something is to, in a way, do focusing on it. To do focusing about your experience of whatever that thing is that you're writing about. Attending to the raw experience that you had and symbolizing it onto the paper. Clearly, such feelings contain not only emotions, but attitudes, past experiences, and complex intellectual differentiations. Thus, the feeling which guides the adjusted person implicitly contains all the intellectual meanings of all his experience. As his feeling functions, it is a modified interaction of these implicit meanings. When an individual is said to act on his feelings, this complex total functions as the basis, this complex total functions as the basis of action. It includes implicit intellectual meanings. It is not mere emotion. Right, so the objection, again, was that this successful client has no intellectually refined differentiations. They only feel their pure emotion. And Gendlin is saying that actually within the reference, within the things that we experience as we are experiencing are our intellectual meanings implicit in there, right? So all of our thoughts are implicit in the feelings that we have. And they, how did he say this? Is a complex total, right? All of our thoughts are living together in a way in each felt sense. They inform the felt sense, right? The feelings and the felt senses that we have in response to anything are shaped by everything, everything by everything. So our felt sense is shaped by all our experiences and all our thoughts and all our ideas and all the concepts and theories that we've ever learned. So all of that stuff is implicit in the feelings that we have about something. I'm gonna go heat up my tea. Okay. So, objection 3. It seems that there is no place for culture and social training in Rogerian theory. That's interesting. Rogerian theory holds that the adjusted person's own organismic experience is a sufficient basis for all perceptions and actions. Psychotherapy is a process in which one overthrows cultural constructs and judgments which were introjected from others. Introjection always makes for maladjustment in that it distorts awareness of organismic experience. Wow, okay, that's great. Distorts awareness of organismic experience. This is what I was saying yesterday about spontaneity and how pure spontaneity is not the same as just following every impulse we have now, because as we are now, we are heavily distorted from awareness of our organismic experience. Right? There's so much experience, so much training and learning that we've gone through that fucks up our ability to be aware of our experience, our somatic experience, our emotions, our feelings, etc. And so, in that state, you can't really respond spontaneously to the actual present moment, because you're not experiencing the actual present moment. All cultural meanings and social training thus appear maladjusted. The optimal person seems to have no need of them. The client, in theory, drops them. The client in therapy drops them. Okay, but Gendlin is saying what the theory is, or how the theory is understood. Let's keep going. The theory appears false. Social psychology has shown the immense influence of culture and socialization. Does Rogerian theory naively omit these discoveries? It seems to hold that the individual, if congruently aware of all his organismic experiences, can dig out of himself alone all the meanings and differentiations he uses. It seems to hold that the individual can dig out of himself all the meanings and differentiations he uses. Yet these meanings and differentiations really come from millennia of civilization. The culture and community strive to preserve and teach them. We know that an individual derives most of the meanings and perceptions of his experience from his culture. His contribution of completely new perceptions is proportionally small. Okay. This is very much related to Gendlin's everything by everything idea. We are the furthest point in how do I describe that? Everything that has come before has fed into the present moment, has fed into your experience right now. And that is literally everything that has come before. So again, the misinterpretation omits the fact that a subjective feeling implicitly includes the meanings of many, many experiences. What an individual was taught is part of his experience. Whether the teaching is an abstract perception of some value, or whether it is an interpersonal attitude, if he is congruently aware of it, then it is implicit in his subjective experiencing. If the individual is aware of all his experiences, he is thus aware also of all the cultural influences he has experienced. Such awareness, however, is not a symbolized memory of each experience. It is a functioning of a feeling process which can implicitly contain them. I'm reminded now, he talks about jazz, I'm pretty sure, in that other paper I mentioned, Improvisation Provides, or at least about people who compose music and how, these really great composers, we look at their work and we attribute to them this genius of like how much meaning they included in their work, how many references they are making in their work, subtle references to other musicians, to all sorts of things, right? You can see their inspiration. But what he was saying in that paper was that maybe all those references are not deliberately put there, but rather that they show up because the composer is, as he's saying here, that all the thoughts and feelings and creative expressions that come from a person now implicitly contain in them everything that that person has experienced before, right? And if you are congruent, right, if nothing is blocking the expression, if nothing is this is like it's hard to explain, but this is that when he keeps talking about that word functioning, experiences functioning in the feeling process, but they're like accessible, right? You're not explicitly aware of it, but your influences are shaping everything that you do. And so inevitably, just by expressing oneself freely, your inspirations, your history reveals itself in all sorts of ways. So within this objection, what is he saying? So the objection is that in this kind of therapy, according to the theory, it seems like a person drops and lets go of everything he's learned. But he's saying that admits to consider the fact that within everything, within every felt sense, within every experience, within every feeling and every thought that a person has, is contained everything that they've ever learned and experienced. So you can't just, it doesn't just go away. But I don't know how to say then, maybe he will do it in the next few paragraphs, but how to say what is happening when people see this idea that in therapy clients just drop all the ideas that they've gotten from other people It seems that way from the outside. But what is happening when we take this into account? I don't know. The theory also implies that the adjusted person will integrate culturally given experiences, perceptions, and teachings together with all his experiences. Each moment's subjective feeling integrates experiences. Each moment's subjective feeling integrates experiences. Considering what he said before, that the experiencing itself modifies and integrates. Right, so it's not just the feeling itself, but the attention given to the feeling, the way that the feeling is experienced, which integrates it, right? I'll keep going. Naturally, if culturally given experiences are integrated and modified by all the individual's experiences, he will not be a carbon copy of the cultural model. For example, wherever the cultural teaching conflicts with other experiences of his organism and tends to distort these, the adjusted person will have overthrown the distortion. His subjective integration may be different than some cultural values demand, but he will have taken account of these cultural values implicitly in his total feeling. He will have included whatever a human organism could possibly experience in line with these values. Right, so you have the person is not denying the values, nor is he, they, her, nor are they holding fast to them, right? Like that's the difference, is you're not rejecting the values, nor are you holding on to the values and putting them above your own experience and neglecting your own experience in favor of these values. Right? You're not holding fast to them intellectually and not paying attention to your own experience for the sake of holding fast to those values. You're integrating them, and they mutually modify each other. You know, the coffee grounds or instant coffee grounds in the coffee example that I was using yesterday. They don't stay separate. They combine and they modify each other. The water is no longer water. The instant coffee grounds are no longer instant coffee grounds. There is this one new thing, integrated thing. That's what happens with the cultural values, you know. In an adjusted person, the values are taken into account and they modify the person. But in modifying the person, they are also modified, so they are not perfectly in line with the way that they're taught by culture. Thus, culture and social training are not obviated by Rogerian theory, provided that congruent means the present functioning and inter-modification of all aspects of experience. An adjusted individual who trusts his organism acts on feeling which implicitly contains all experiences and is the modified integration of them. The feeling implicitly contains the feeling implicitly contains his cultural values and perceptions insofar as these can be experienced. Yeah, so to act on one's feelings, if all of your feelings and experiences are fully integrated and congruent, is to act in such a way that takes account of everything you've ever experienced and learned. It rejects nothing. Everything is integrated. Nothing is held at arm's length. Nothing is in the shadow, so to speak, right? There's nothing within you that you are psychologically and emotionally trying to hide away and keep out of experience. You're fully integrated. So all feeling, all behavior takes everything into account. Okay. Objection 4. The Rogerian optimal person seems to lack consistency. He seems to change from moment to moment. Rogers says of the adjusted person and of the successful client after therapy that he will meet each situation with behavior which is a unique and creative adaptation to the newness of that moment. The prospect of continual newness in the adjusted person is disquieting. A person who goes by no personal constructs, who is always new, seems unpredictable, unreliable, and a little like a loose schizophrenic. The schizophrenic finds only too often that he feels like a new and different person than he was a moment ago. In each segment of his life, he feels different. He has no solid self, no consistent personal constructs. This is really interesting, because it is such a huge thing that we value in culture is consistency, right? The first examples that are coming to mind are political figures. When you have somebody running for office who has been pushing the same ideas his whole career, people really champion that, right? That they're consistent. You can't change their mind. They hold fast to their values. They can't be bought, etc. Which makes sense, but in a way, if a person, well, I'm not going to say that's bad, but another way to look at it is that, like, if a person has held fast to the same ideas and the same values for their whole life, for example, that they're not really responding to every moment. They're not meeting the moment fresh and spontaneously, right? They're kind of like holding fast to this construct of themselves that they created years and years ago, right? Like they're not updating based on new information and circumstances. Again, the theory depends on something it does not formulate, namely the continuity of experiencing. Each moment is new, but it is not a new kaleidoscopic shakeup of all experiences. Organismic life and the subjective process are continuous processes. Experiences are not static contents, either in or out of awareness. They are the functioning of momentary subjectivity. They modify and are modified as each new perception is integrated. Integration and modification imply continuity, not an abruptly different self. If something is to be modified, it must be continuously present throughout the process of its modification. The new adaptation to a situation is a modification of experiences, as these can be continuously present implicitly in experiencing. What I'm getting really is just this emphasis on, again, that we are not made up of static content, but rather we are a flowing, in-process organism. And so we flow and interact with our experience and our circumstances moment by moment. What does he say here? Integration and modification imply continuity, not an abruptly different self. Again, I keep going back to this instant coffee example, right? But you don't go from separate to integrated as two distinct, unconnected moments. There's a movement, a flow between those. It happens over time. This is not what I'm trying to say. It happens in a process, right? It's not a series of distinct events. The coffee doesn't disintegrate and integrate into the water abruptly. It happens in a process. It's an action. It's not just two distinct moments. If we reformulate the theory in this way, schizophrenic dissociation appears as a sharp contrast to continuously adaptive experiencing. In the schizophrenic, subjective experiencing does not function optimally. Experiences are not available to interpret each new situation. Even conventional learnings and meanings are often unavailable. They are not implicit in the present subjective feeling, and thus cannot function to interpret present perception. In contrast, adjustment implies that there is continuity of presently functioning experience. So what I'm kind of getting about what he's saying about schizophrenia here is that in each of the different modes or whatever, I don't know how to talk about that, in the different personalities of a schizophrenic, the experiences and memories and knowledge and feelings and etc. of the other parts of the other modes are inaccessible, right? So it's like in each section, in each mode of experience as a schizophrenic, everything from all the other modes is cut off and inaccessible and doesn't inform what's happening. And in contrast, what Gendlin and Rogers are saying is that the adjusted person is informed all the time by everything that they've ever experienced. And they're not at all cut off from any of it, even though it's not necessarily explicitly present in mind. It's living in them and informing all of their feelings and behavior. And yeah. How much more? I think I'm gonna stop now. All right, so I'll pick back up with objection 5. Psychotherapy is said to be merely intellectualization.